This is Wayward Radio, your official source for news and information on the Wayward Realms. Greetings, fellow wanderers, and welcome to Wayward Radio, your ultimate gateway of untold stories, hidden lore, and the latest updates from OnceLost Games' epic creation, the Wayward Realms. I'm Joe, your host and fellow explorer, ready to guide you through a world of mystery, magic, and mayhem. Today, we're looking at the role of choice and consequences in the Wayward Realms. How does one create a game where choice is paramount, but the game still functions as a cohesive narrative? Where do systems and stories intersect, and how does a game developer choose the size of the role as a player's choice in that? We're going to dive into all of that today. We've got some great guests, starting with Blake, designer and lead writer of the Wayward Realms.
Hello.
Hey, Blake, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, dude. Doing great. And also Michael, the lead designer of the Wayward Realms.
Hello.
How you doing, Michael?
Not too bad.
All right. It's great to have you guys here. Thanks for making the time. I know you're busy gentlemen. So I want to jump right in with this question. First, Blake, then Michael. Briefly, can you walk our audience through what your role involves day to day, and what are some of the key responsibilities and challenges you face in your positions?
Yeah, so like most lead writers on projects, it involves a lot of review work. Have to make sure that everybody's kind of keeping up with everything. It's a little different from being a writer. You mainly maintain a lot of information that people are sending your way, making sure everything's cohesive. But I think probably the most fun part about it is you get to do a lot of exploration of like initial ideas, key ideas, and core concepts before the rest of the team gets access to them or starts brainstorming them.
Okay. All right. And what about you, Michael?
For day to day, because I'm lead designer, it's a bit of designing and a bit of leading as well, a bit of organizing my team. So, I say, document creation, document review. When I say documents, I mean the mechanic documents, primarily system documents, mechanic documents, like things that will translate to players to be able to do stuff in the game, right? Right. Review. A lot of scoping. I know Blake loves that word. Mainly what it is, because we're in early access, a lot of it is me being very, very vigilant and aware not to do feature creep. Is one of my main jobs, is to put a line in the sand saying this can be achieved now, this can be looked at later, right? So a lot of that, right? I also lead the team, so a lot of mechanic discussions, leading meetings, also working with other departments as well, like making sure I'm in sync with writers team, in sync with programming, in sync with UI, in sync with sound design, stuff like that. So a lot of things all over the place, not really just one simple role. I do a lot. So
a lot of hats there.
Yeah. Well, one hat with many spins and directions is what I would say. So.
Got it. I like that. There's a couple of terms that you used here. I'd like to see if maybe we can get kind of like a definition on that. And sorry about this, Blake, because I know you don't like it either, and it's probably a term I'm not going to like either. Scoping. What is that? What does that mean?
So for me, scoping is what is in scope for example, for this project. So I come from system analyst, system designer background. So really, in terms of the Wayward Realms, it is what is in scope for the early access and what is going to be in scope after. So really, again, I am very anti-feature creep, and scoping allows for us to prevent things from spiraling out of control and ballooning infinitely. We get a lot of ideas, and a lot of time that is an amazing idea, not in scope. We push it off to after the early access release, right? So it's a tool. Really, it's a tool to allow us to prevent feature creep. It's the anti-feature creep, as I've said that many, many times. And it's also a frame of mind to kind of help me and my team be aware as to what we're looking at, what we want to do, and what we're able to do at this moment. So,
got it. So it sounds to me like prioritization.
Yeah, prioritization, and also being aware of how much work we're able to achieve and what can we put into, like, we only have so much time to be able to make a great game.
Yeah.
Or at least for the early access. And it really is a question of what can we shove into that time effectively and what can sit and wait later on.
And feature creep, what exactly is that? You're using it, and I'm kind of getting a sense of what the definition of that term is, but
Yeah,
I'd like to see if you can kind of
for sure.
scope that for us.
Feature creep is it can be involved in any project, but you can see it a lot in games where you get things in early access or things in indie, and the idea being is that you have more ideas than you do have time to develop them. So, and what happens is that you get a very crowded design. I'm looking mainly from a designer aspect, right? You get a very crowded design, a lot of mechanics, but they're not deep, they're not fleshed out, they don't connect well, right? It's the idea of like people spitting in more and more ideas. Features are creeping in more and more and more as time goes on, with no real ability to control how much effort they will take, how well connected they are, kind of the overall view, right? So you kind of get more of a diluted, convoluted experience due to feature creep or failure projects because you just have too much work and too little time.
Got it. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. All right, so wow, you gentlemen are absolute heavyweights here in getting things on a day-to-day basis off the ground. But all this, one of the things that I'm constantly impressed by regarding OnceLost games and the approach to the Wayward Realms is, at least you project this and talk a lot about it. You guys are really focused, like a laser beam, on your philosophies and what you can do and can't do. And there's so many ideas that come from the community, and the feedback that we get in the community is, it's a great idea. It's definitely worth looking at, but right now, like, here's kind of where we're at. And so you guys are really hyper focused, and I haven't really seen that much from really kind of anywhere else. I've never heard of it before, for probably a variety of reasons. But it's always really impressive, and it kind of makes me go back to, what are the philosophies of OnceLost games? What's the design philosophy behind the Wayward Realms? And here, regarding player choice, and maybe we can start with Blake on this one. What are the philosophies behind player choice?
So I think every developer at the studio has a slightly different version of what they'll tell you of this, but more or less align. So from my perspective as a writer, it's basically the philosophy is to give whoever's playing the game as much freedom to do whatever they want in the game. Whether that's, like if they want to role play as, I don't know, someone like Dexter, brainwashed as a child, they wanted to, like, they're a serial killer, they weren't told that was wrong, and then they want to grow into someone that's like, okay, this is morally wrong. From a perspective of most games, you can't really do that because NPCs and characters don't really change their opinion of the player once they've reached a certain reputation. But with the way the VGM works, it allows the player the freedom to do that. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, without a doubt. And Blake, what about you regarding the philosophy of player choice? What can you explain what that is for us?
I think you mean Michael.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's all good. Blake, can you say it again? We'll use slightly different words this time.
Just repeat yourself. I apologize.
Yeah, I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, please, Michael. The philosophy behind player's choice. How do you, on a daily basis, how do you, enact that philosophy on player's choice and what it is that you do? Yeah.
So, as we were talking about in kind of the warm up to this, one of the things I was getting at was that when we're approaching this game, the Grand RPG, I also call it the Fantasy Life Simulator, is that it's a kind of a blank slate for us to reapproach computer role playing games, like from the ground level, right? Like no assumptions. take a step back, dive onto it, right? And one of the core tenets of that was freedom of player choice. And in terms of the design, we're intending to have the player have the freedom of choice, the free will to be able to make any choice they want without any inhibition or any friction to make that choice, right? It becomes less about choice paralysis. It tends to happen with people. Like, you have very binary sets of choices in the mini games, right? You can be this, you can be that. I could choose this path, choose that path, right? We want to kind of open things up more in the design. So in terms of the narrative, having both the narrative of the world and of the character, the player can just do what they want and not really have to worry about gaming the system or choosing the best path, but choosing a path that makes sense for them, right? And then also in the mechanics, making the mechanic play like the field of all the various mechanics we have, making it rewarding for a player to explore one versus another on one playthrough, or do the opposite on another playthrough, right? I said free will earlier, and for me, philosophically, free will is necessarily like the ability to make choices, but the ability to not be hindered in making and going where your will wants to go, right? Less friction is the main thing, right? And so a lot of games have very narrow paths or choices, a lot of linear quest lines with a couple of branches that conveniently merge back together again at the very end, and systems are very isolated and blocked off from each other, right? And so many of the ideas that we want to do is interconnect systems more, so that you can either dive deep into one system or spread yourself out however you see fit, and also pairing that with a narrative that is more focused on the player's choices instead of just following the breadcrumbs. That's the general gist of it from the top level.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting how you're creating as a design choice in order to enable player choice. The systems that you're creating are work in tandem to, enable choice versus basically, breadcrumbing, so to speak.
Yeah.
But and actually, Blake, I want to go. I want to go to you here. I've done some creative writing, on my own. I run a Dungeons and Dragons campaign here and there, and as a DM, it's very difficult to kind of roll with it. When your players at a D&D table are making choices that you didn't narratively plan out for, it can be really difficult to kind of roll with that. But you're in the room and you can do it. It's not impossible. Blake, you're not in the room. How is it that how are you able to create a narrative? Like, what's your process in creating a narrative in order to facilitate player choice?
So this sort of harkens back to like traditional quest design and RPGs. So there's a saying that you'll hear a lot from like prolific quest designers, is that you shouldn't railroad the player into a story that you want to tell. You should give them the option to experience it the way they want to experience it. It's sort of the same with the way we design quests and storylines for the Wayward Realms. So there are certain aspects of quests you can leave open-ended. Like, for instance, there's a quest that we like to reference a lot in development. It's a ring that you're supposed to find, and you don't tell the player how to find it. You tell them who has it, and you just let them acquire it the way they want. You don't tell a narrative of you have to go to this person and complete this quest and go through this dungeon. You let them find it, you let them get it, and they can do whatever they want with it. If they don't want to give it to the quest giver, they throw it in the ocean.
Interesting. Wow. So there's a couple of things here I want to unpack. So number one, what I can do after I'm told, like, hey, so-and-so's got the ring, go get it for me, I can approach them and persuade or intimidate. I could follow them and sneak into their house and steal it. I could beat them up and swipe it from them, outright kill them and, backstab them in the dark, right? These are all things that you're sort of like looking at, like, if the player wants to, do that, then we facilitate it in that way. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then now you've got this quest item in your inventory. You're allowing players to just like destroy it if they want to?
Yeah, do whatever you want with it. Give it to someone else, keep it, destroy it.
Wow. So, okay, from a design perspective, not Blake, Michael.
Yeah.
I'm going to see how long I can run with this.
Yeah, good luck.
From a design perspective, how do you look at like this this case that we've got here where I've got this ring in my inventory and I'm thinking about, either selling it or destroying it, or how do you plan for that? Like what do you put in place to make that rewarding?
Yeah, so the system itself is the term we use is object-oriented questing, in the sense that the ring, the objectives, places, people, things they're just objects in the quest code. The best way to say it, right? Just to really simplify it, right? And what the player is doing, they're not like more traditional role playing, like traditional role playing games, is that they're just following the steps. You do this, and then this unlocks. You do that. Right, that sequence breadcrumb steps. Right, this is you have a series of objects, people, places, things, targets, whatever, and you just orientate them. I have the ring now. One of the jokes we always do when I'm explaining the system or outcome of the system would be like, it's Lord of the Rings. You're Frodo. Step 1, give the ring to Gollum. Take a step back, watch how the game reacts. But all it is just manipulating object states. This object is now in this person's inventory. And that's how it sits, right? And so it really opens up freedom for the player to change how those objects are configured, right? I'm going to take the ring to the middle of the ocean and chuck it right in the middle and say like, off I go, right? Or sell it, or use it myself, or use it to make something else, right? Just orientating these objects, right? And so they have freedom to do that. And also they have, like you were alluding to earlier, freedom of how they want to do it. I am going to steal the ring by pickpocketing. I am going to seduce the person and take it and get them just to give it to me by just seducing them, either by being a close friend, spending a year with them, adventuring with them, being best buddies, and then they give me the ring and I walk away. Right? But the thing is, like, the idea of what we want to achieve is that how you orientate these things is up to player choice. And how you do that is also freedom choice. There is no like locked out systems. It isn't like this type of quest you lock out from yourself. You can do yourself if you want. It may be suboptimal, but that's the beauty of it. Maybe beating up the guy is suboptimal, but it's fun to do. That's what the player is willing to do. That's the freedom of will. Are they able to do the will? Are they able to execute their will? Right. That's freedom of will. So we have both things and hows, and those we're designing a system that's open for players to do both. That's kind of the core of it. The easiest top down explanation of kind of what we're trying to achieve on that.
Incredible. I really love it. It's a very interesting way to approach game design. Now, Blake, I want to shift over to you for a second here, continuing on with this case we've got here regarding the One Ring. How as a person who's crafting a narrative, how do you make sure that the narrative fits what I decide to do with the ring? Okay, we've got an NPC that says, go get that ring. I mean, I think it's you can kind of figure out that you should give it back to the NPC, right? So I go and get the ring. I'm not giving it back to the NPC. So to me, that kind of leaves a dead end quest. So how narratively, like, how do you plan for that? And how do you continue to push the player forward despite their actions?
So with most traditional games, the writer doing the quest would have to account for specific player behavior. That's one thing that the earlier Fallout games, for instance, did really well, especially Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 1. Now, with our game in particular, we have the VGM. So the VGM can generate quest branches on a whim. It's constantly monitoring what the player is doing, what they're interacting with, and say they decide to diverge from some pre-written branches that we've already got, or they decide to diverge from the quest entirely. It'll generate those branches based on what the player has done.
Wait a second. The VGM will create quest branches on a whim?
Yep.
How does it do that?
I'll let Michael answer that question.
So not Blake Michael.
Michael, yeah, Michael. That's going to hop in. Yeah. So, I mean, we're eventually going to get to the AI part of the conversation, obviously, but we got there early. So, the idea is that, and to go back, a building block of what we just talked about earlier, the idea of the object-oriented questing, right? You have these objects, and when a quest comes to an end or significantly changes, or the thing is, like, the system, when I was designing it, knowing how I would react, wanting to break it, right? So it's assuming breaks. So the idea is that the VGM has quest lines, but not completely filled, just a couple steps ahead. Just not deep, and we call them branches. And when the player does something that would break a branch, one way or another, I always go back to it because it's such a fun thought experiment as even just a tabletop game master. I give the run ring to Gollum. What happens, right? And the idea was that the VGM would look at context and start processing it. So obviously there's a little bit of artificial intelligence that we're going to have in the game to be able to pull this off. And we're now live in an age where we're able to integrate artificial intelligences into a role-playing game to be able to give us what I call creative calculations, right? We can provide context from, say, for example, those object orients, right? With a little bit of context, like the ring has been placed on the ground in the ocean. The ring has been given to Gollum, right? Those are a bit of code, like Booleans that we've oriented, and plus context snips. And so we can feed that into a LLM, a large language model, and tell it, hey, give us an output of a very specific type that we can then feed back in. So that's like the technical side of it. But what happens is that we can now take context and convert it into machine readable format that can then be prompted in and update the system. Instead of having a infinite number of else statements and variable checks and switches, we now have a large language model that can take context, give you output that could be more machine readable, and then can be propagated through a system. So the idea would be you break a branch, it goes, oh, you broke it. It can then take a step back, look at all the context of the quest, context of the character, context of what you just did, and reconstitute a new branch, a new couple steps forward of what reasonably could happen or what reasonably the objective has changed into. So that's like the really top end down. I can't really go much more deeper into it. That's what we're playing with. Now, again, we're playing with it. I should always leave the caveat is that we're really trying. We're playing with it. We're getting really positive answers here. That's what we're aiming towards. I'm not saying, oh, it's going to be the most epic LLM ever, but that's the target that we're aiming for. That's the promise of this new technology that we're now playing with for this game.
Wow. Now this has to be, the LLM that's being used has got to be a new feature for development of this game, right?
Yeah. Relatively, obviously, it's only been a couple years of these things, but sorry, but go ahead and ask your question. Sorry, I think you're.
Yeah, no, I was wondering, where. I don't even know if you can answer this question, but I mean, is this recently? You guys went from the platform 5 to 5.5. Is it a part of that? Or is this a proprietary LLM?
No. This is something more open. I'm not really willing to talk about which one we're specifically using, only because we're working on it now. The field has evolved so quickly, even the last 5 months.
Right. Yeah.
5, 6. I mean, DeepSeek. I mean, just for context, of people for 20 years from now, DeepSeek just dropped a month ago, and just completely set afire everything. The field is evolving rapidly, and the ones that we're playing with now are probably going to be completely obsolete by the time early access comes out. Right. So which exact model we're using, doesn't really matter at this point.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think in the notes people eventually see which ones we're playing with, but but the idea is that I lost my train of thought slightly.
No, it's okay.
It's not. But the idea is that we're going to be using open models that are open source. We're not going to be using anything crazy proprietary stuff. And really, I think in terms of the design and coding, when the game ships, people will see exactly what we're using, how we're using it, like the prompts and stuff like that. It'll be very easily visible, like very transparent in terms of what models are being used and how we're actually leveraging them. And to the point where, it's just you're piping prompts into an LLM, right? It's just I gather information, package it, ship it in, get an output up, process it back in.
Right.
So people can mod that. I mean, that's totally moddable territory, and I look forward to that. Yeah, right. Prompt engineering. It's just prompt engineering.
Wow.
So I mean, it can get really interesting. Now, again, we hope we're getting really positive results now. I always want to say that. Maybe we'll hit like a brick wall and suddenly this isn't really an option, but what we're hitting is giving us really positive response. But that's the idea of the VGM at this iteration of what it looks like, is using LLMs to do creative computation to give us context. You give it context, it can give you an output more in machine readable code. So you can have that barrier between like, and a lot of games do it in the past, of like trying to get the context narrative somehow translated into just Boolean and variables, and it's hard to work with. Whereas an LLM can actually kind of smooth that barrier a little bit.
Yeah,
so that's kind of
ones.
Yeah.
Wow. So currently, right now, the idea is to allow for modding, but also the LLM that's being used, and there's a couple. They're open source. You're going to be transparent about which ones were used in the creation of the game.
Oh, I mean, I say that. I mean, it'll be pretty. It might be. I mean, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, like if we're the ones we're playing with WoW, I don't know if we're like, oh, we're. This is the lineage of ones we failed at. But I mean, like it would be very. I mean, I think we're gonna have an AI talk maybe later, like a more focused one, obviously.
Yeah.
But in terms of, we're not looking to like hide this stuff. It's the other thing, like because we're using open models. There's no real need to be secret about it, right? So.
Yeah, but this is stuff that fans are dying to hear, and the fact that the idea currently right now, and of course it can always be changed. So dear listener, be aware of that. If we're having a conversation, it could always change.
Yeah, exactly.
The idea is that the LLM would be moddable as well.
Well, the entire game will be moddable, but I mean, it's going to be. We're not going to try to like. Obfuscate it, because we can't afford to obfuscate it. There's no point in us doing it. I mean, us taking 3 weeks to like obfuscate it will mean 3 minutes of people opening it up.
Unbelievable.
So I mean, there's no real point in like trying to hide what we're doing. It's what we're piping. We're using it to be that mediate between that barrier between those two types of game understanding, right? So
incredible. Wow. Thank you. So this has been some really great info here that I don't think has been talked about before. So awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to kind of shift back into the the world of the narrative, and over to Blake on this, and I know the two of you work very closely together. Narrative. How does the narrative inform which systems make sense in the game? So I imagine there's going to be quite a bit of so Michael, when talking about like scoping out the game, how do you look at what Blake is creating narratively, and you look at what systems that could lead to, and then Blake, what kind of systems are you looking at and saying okay, we have this capability in the game, I could tell this story. So I want to start with Blake on that a little bit. How does the narrative inform the systems, and then vice versa with Michael?
So it's a little different than the way most games are developed. I think that in many ways we've been kind of fortunate to have a long pre-production cycle. So with most games, you've got all of the mechanics mapped out before you start adding narrative elements. Like you've got a story mapped out. But with this game, we've been developing lore and quests and stuff in tandem with design. So there's a lot of instances where systems will pop up as we're creating quests. And one example that I really like to use is during the very first iteration of the quest system, we didn't have a lot of documentation for it. We were trying to find our footing, trying to figure out where to go with it. And I kept running into roadblocks where I was wanting to use things like scripted sequences for more like cinematic, storytelling moments, which isn't possible with the kind of budget we have, and like with the way the VGM is, those are going to be relatively limited.
Yeah.
Now, I think one thing that we have a habit of doing is looking back to Daggerfall. So if you recall in Daggerfall, there's I don't think the system ever had a name because it was really common in games back then, but I call it the context box system. So you could walk into a town and a little box would pop up and it would say a note blows at your feet. You pick it up and read it. There's a key attached to it. So I looked at that and I was like, how can we apply this to the game that we currently have? How can this be used to not only tell more interesting stories, but add more unique gameplay elements? So what we sort of landed with is something like that, but kind of on steroids, I guess. So the final plan for it essentially is you've got a context box that'll pop up. It'll describe a scripted sequence, like an arrow flying towards you, nailing your back to the wall, something like that. But we also want to have things like active skill checks and parts of the dialogue system attached to it. So say you have a companion that gets slain during combat, but they somehow survive, but they're on their last dying breath. A box will pop up. It'll describe them breathing heavily and gushing blood and coughing, and they'll start to say their last words, but the player has the opportunity to pull out like an active skill, like medicine, for instance, to try to heal them or keep them from dying. Now, if they pass that, they may buy them a little time to get them to someone that can heal them. But if they don't and they fail, they could end up killing their companion instead. So these are systemic elements that are born out of narrative necessity.
What governs the pass or fail? Is it like a D20 roll plus a proficiency check, kind of like in D&D, or is there something else involved?
So it's more along the lines of a skill gradient. There's no dice rolls in the game. Michael would be able to go into that in more detail than I can.
Yeah. Okay. So Michael, in this instance, when we're looking at the healing of a companion. By the way, very interesting idea here. That it sounds to me like what Blake was describing was kind of like a break in the action, where you're a companion that you have with you might be dying, and then a dialogue box pops up explaining the situation.
Yeah. So So a lot of the, again, we took a step back and threw out assumptions and went back into the game with new first principles and new ideas, right? So we went a lot of back in time to kind of pull ideas from older games. Daggerfall is a huge inspiration for all of us.
Sure.
And so the idea would be, it's kind of, the best way to say it is that one of the pitfalls of modern AAA gaming, even AA gaming, is that there's kind of a assumption that you have to do everything graphically, if that makes sense. Like you have to always show it graphically, and
right.
that's the only way you can communicate to a player is visually for most of the stuff, right, or audio. Whereas if we were thinking that with the context box system is that we can just take a break in action, and instead of spending hours and hours animating and coloring and making sure it looks right and making sure there's no flaws in it and recording audio, just have a window pop up, explain the situation, and maybe options for the player to engage in certain behaviors. That cuts away from hours and hours and hours of work to minutes of work, or even no work at all, depending on how procedurally generated this becomes. So we can now expand countless possibilities across the entire board using this type of system. So, and the one thing on top of that, and we talk about it internally, but I don't think really communicated out to kind of the fan base or kind of one of the expectations of the game, is that there's a little bit of needing the player to invest a little bit mentally into the game, in the sense that they need to kind of visualize the stuff happening. They need to kind of buy in to themselves, kind of making the narrative in their head, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a little bit of theater of the mind.
Exactly. A little bit of theater of the mind, a little bit of theater of narrative. Like the player has to kind of construct a little bit in the back. We can do a lot of the work, but there has to be a little more player buy-in on that level than what most games of this field is trying to do. So with that in the way, the skill checks would be, there is no, like Blake was saying, there's those dice rolls.
Right.
In this game, it's you compare numbers and you get different types of skill check outcomes. So pass fail is one. We have what's called a outcome table, so it's kind of more based on like I'm a tabletop guy, so like based on some newer games, having the idea of like you roll on a table, and those tables will kind of dictate outcomes to you. So it's more dynamic and more nuanced, and there can be more than just one thing happen. You could get multiple columns on that table. You roll this, you get multiple possibilities or random possibilities within ranges. Anyway, and then what's called skill gradient, where it's like it kind of mediates between player skill and character skill. So it's like gradient difficulty based on skill level of tasks.
Okay.
So anyway, we have interesting ways of addressing it. So not just you roll a d20 and whatever the number is, you get an outcome. It is more what your character is in that moment versus the challenge in that moment. That's kind of the way we address it.
Oh, so a lot of context is added there.
Yeah, so a lot of context of what your character is, a lot of context of the situation that you're given. Again, the VGM and the overall simulation is aware of the character level, so it's not going to be like, oh, you're a first level character. There's the dragon. We rolled on a random table. You got a dragon. Like, oh, thanks, game. It's more, there is some understanding. Of course, things are random and pop up, and there's context and there's evil, but there is also a little bit of constraint. We're not just going to throw dragons at your face. Oh, maybe I might be mean when I'm getting the last little tables done. I might just throw dragon in a first level character.
My level 1 character just starts,
Dragon.
walking out fresh from character generation and dragon in the face.
It's like, okay, well, looking through the character sheet. Okay, well, here we go.
Here we go. Here it is.
Here we go.
So in this situation here, in the hypothetical situation that Blake kind of gave us, narratively, what we're looking at is, okay, so now we've got a companion. They're dying on the ground. Dialogue box pops up. We've got some choices here after we read the explanation of what's happening. Okay, and I choose to heal. Now, I could, have it could be pass fail based on the context. And the context here is that maybe the fight is still active. And therefore, I've got a lower chance at healing because of all the distraction. Maybe I finally killed the guy and there is no active fight going on. So context dictates there's no fight going on. Maybe I have a higher chance at healing so is that kind of what you're aiming at here, Michael? Or okay, so
exactly. And the idea is that, numbers feed into the character's ability to achieve the task. Numbers feed into the difficulty of the task based on context, situation, NPCs you're facing, a whole bunch of stuff. Compare those numbers, and then we can, based on that, even if you're succeeding, you may succeed a lot, may succeed a little, you may fail a little, may fail a lot, right? It's more than just a pass fail is in the system, but it's not used a lot. It's more the outcome, it's more the gradient of outcomes that matters. You may fail a little bit. So you didn't just kill the guy. He's not doing well, but you may have made the situation slightly worse, or you may have healed him a little bit, but not a lot. You still need to kind of hurry on this, right? So it's not, we're looking for, again, it kind of ropes all the way back to a little bit of philosophy of player choice, in the sense that giving the player more nuanced outcomes is part of the system too, in the sense that it is not just a path A, path B. It's a gradient. It's almost random, and not random, but it's more dynamic than just path A, path B. There's more going on. The player has to accommodate and think about and adjust to. And again, having that narrative in their head, kind of string it all together in tandem with what the game's doing.
Holy smokes, that's brilliant.
Yeah. That's the hope. That's what we're hoping for. So
wow. So it's not just like, okay, I healed the guy. It's like, okay, there's a lot in context. You did okay. Congratulations, you healed the guy, but for +4 hit points.
Yeah, or maybe you're exactly. You're amazing. You just you nail it. Bam, 20 pieces. Oh, I feel 100% better. Thank you. Or it's just like, oh, like I failed a little bit. So he's not dead. He didn't fail. He failed a little bit. So he's a little bit worse off. You got to maybe have to manage situation. Maybe you get a couple last dying words with him, and then that's it, right? So maybe you did fail, but you fail forward is a term that's used. But it's more like there's more than just binary outcomes. It's more gradient. There's more going on. That's kind of what we're aiming for. I don't know whether or not that depth is achievable for the early access, but it's definitely part of the design that's being built in today in the engine or in the systems that are there now. So
That's a good caveat. Thank you for that, because early access is still being planned for end of the year, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so the depth of that may not be in early access, but at least that's the goal. Incredible! Wow, I mean, I was excited for this game, but now I'm really
yeah, I know. Yeah, people. It takes time for people coming on the design team to really get like what we're trying to pull off. And like I said before, we're trying to like almost everything we do is like a paradigm break. Like we're just not approaching things normally. We're not just kind of seeing what everyone else has done and just kind of making it better or refining it a little bit here and there. But really, everything we're doing is like breaking and pushing and trying something new, and we're doing it just across the entire board. And again, just go back to your early access thing. Yeah, the idea is that the systems we're building now we want stuff in the future. The framework's being built now. So early access may not have everything, obviously. I really want to make that as a caveat, but the seeds will be there. The design will be there for us fleshing it out easier when the time comes. So, we may not get the crazy, skill checks, active skill checks in the context box right off the bat, but we will have something going on. The context box will still be very useful and interesting, maybe not fully featured out yet, right, for early access release, right? So just to kind of like frame that, a lot of it's going to be early access release from a design standpoint will be, you'll see systems, they'll be interesting, they'll get more interesting as we go, but the initial offering is, again, scoping. We want it to be solid, tight, engaging for the player, and then expand on it as we go out. So
yeah, wow. So Blake, go ahead. I know you want to expand on something here on this.
Yeah, so as Michael said, that like everything we're doing in the design department is a paradigm break, and everybody that joins the team, the design team, has a bit of a hard time at first. Just to give you an idea of how different things are that we're trying to attempt is, I come from a traditional RPG development background, like accounting for branches, different states like that, go this, do that. When I first learned the quest system and Michael was trying to explain it, I kid you not, after that call, I went and screamed into a pillow because I could not understand what we were trying to do. It took a very long time until I understood the system. I had to unlearn everything I had learned before.
That's incredible. And what is that moment there? You must unlearn all the things you have learned.
Although we do hope that when people are playing it, it's more like this is more the design nightmare side. Like I was telling the entire writers team a while back, like maybe a month or so back, like it's like, yeah, like in Zen Buddhism or in some philosophical, like suffering is enlightenment. You have enlightened this game so much through your suffering writers team, trying to like hammer out this system, trying to like figure this out. So
I think there's a lot that can be a lot of player expectations can be mitigated tremendously through being having these upfront conversations often, and also through marketing.
Yeah,
marketing and advertising can mitigate a tremendous amount of those expectations.
Yeah. Anyway, so so that, and also we hope that us designing it is we're making paradigms, but the player experience is fairly smooth and natural, and we're not like, obviously you have to learn new systems, but they're not so fundamentally different that these players can't get them. Like the actual experience is attainable. Like it may be slightly different combat mechanics, but swing, sword, hit, guy, deal hit points. Oh, I get it. It just, the nuance is slightly different, right? At least the baseline, players can at least pick it up and run with it. That is one of the hopes that we like. This isn't like a completely alien experience to most players. We are aware of like not doing that. So,
all right. So, before we jump over to a couple of questions from Discord, I did want to ask, with all this nuance, can I accidentally create a character that's broken and just doesn't work? And if not, like, how are you ensuring that the player choice is intact if that's not the case?
Want me to take this one, Blake? I'll let you follow up.
Yeah.
Silence is good. Yeah, silence is good. Yeah. So the idea is that when we're looking right for early access, and then as we go through, like move towards a full release, right? The idea is that every skill has a purpose, both integrated in itself, like this core system, but it also maybe touch on other systems too. Like skills are multi-purpose. Skills can reach out across the board and can be touched on different things, and that they have a point, and they have a point that is useful for the player's enjoyment, right? So the idea is that a broken character is a character whose skills, one, aren't balanced right, or two, are using skills that aren't actually useful in the game, but they're in the game anyway. So the idea for what we want to do is making sure that all the skills have a use within themselves and are enjoyable to use within themselves and are part of the greater gameplay loop within themselves. So when you build a weird character, and I want weird characters to be built, like for example, one of the characters I'm always fascinated by would have been the guy doing the mad scientist for Daggerfall. I don't know if you're aware of that character run at all. So the guy in Daggerfall, OG Daggerfall, maybe using Unity but no mods, just went straight language skill in Daggerfall. Just no combat, no magic, just language, and was able to like have an interesting playthrough. We got really interesting. It was a very interesting run. So obviously that was a broken build. He had tons of problems, but I use that as part of my inspiration. I want people to be able to make weird combinations, and although the actual gameplay will be weird, like how they're incentivized themselves to do things and why they're doing things and how that is going to be not standard, it's viable because the skills within themselves are viable, right? Like having broken characters is more of an issue of balancing and usefulness of skills than anything else, right? If your skills are useful and are engaging and are relatively balanced to each other, any type of combination would be functional. Weird, but functional. And that's one thing we want to hope for. Like we will be looking out for weird builds. I will be doing weird builds just to push the system out and see what happens. So
awesome. So stats are probably going to look a little bit different than your normal strength, constitution kind of a.
Those are more or less the same. How you get them is a little bit different. It's more of a skill based system. You're more focused on your skills than you are your higher end stats, like in terms of like prescient what you're doing. Very, very Elder Scroll-y in the sense that your skills are the thing that thrusts your development. Like what you do is how you grow, not level 3. I'm going to take points and put them in things I never used. It's what you do that grows you as a character, and that ramifies out to your higher attributes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Blake, narratively speaking, regarding player choice, where do you draw the line as you're writing out a story? Where do you draw the line between the player choice and the game's cohesiveness? Obviously things have to make sense. Obviously there's a broad sweeping narrative here. So there's got to be some kind of, okay, this is where like this character, this NPC is going to go in this direction, regardless of what the, character chooses. How do you draw that line, and where do you draw that line? How do you figure that out?
My personal philosophy is you don't draw that line. You let the cards fall where they may. So if the writer has written a story and they absolutely want a character to die and the player cannot prevent that in any case, they've failed at designing that quest.
Really? So you don't even, that's not even a thing for you. It's like, just let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, you can include it as a narrative element, maybe make it a little harder to prevent that character from dying, but there should always be the option.
Wow. And then again, if the thing that you're writing, if the anti thing that you're trying to write out, the VGM just kind of picks it up a little bit, right?
Yep.
Incredible. Oh man. Oh,
yeah, it's good. Yeah, and we like the idea of the character engaging in the world. Again, free will, engaging and exacting their will in the world, right? The character's probably going to die, but the player can like really put effort in to make that not happen. Now they're not putting their effort in somewhere else, some other part of the grand narrative, right? You know what I'm saying? Like they're choosing where they want to put their energy and where they want to engage, right? So again, they can't really like Groundhog Day it and like run across the entire game map and like at the right time to do the right things. I don't think that's going to be, although I would love to see that playthrough run. I'm sure someone will like 100% Groundhog Day run, but the idea would be like, again, we don't want to prevent the player from doing what they want to do and having that experience. Maybe they're really tied to that character living, or for example, maybe part of the some type of play style of the game would be like kind of knowing what's going to happen and seeing how they can nudge the narrative a certain way to get what they want. Like you played it 20 times, you know kind of what's going to happen, so you can kind of show up in the right spot at the right time to make a little butterfly effect change and see how that propagates out. That could be part of the enjoyment of the game. But if we don't let the characters die or not die, we force it, you can never get that, you know? So part of failure or part of guaranteed failure, guaranteed success is you kind of lose out in that beauty of, again, a system that can adapt to those changes, right? And seeing how that happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We've got a question here from Discord, guys. You guys up for it?
Yes.
No?
Yes. No. I was muted.
Yeah.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Silence. Okay, this one comes from Jolly Hedril, who says, and I quote, "We've seen fishing and we've heard about tourneys, as in tournaments. In what other ways can a player decide to spend their virtual downtime? What are the team's thoughts on mini games to simulate downtime activities? Will some activities be restricted to characters from certain factions? What activities would you include if time, money weren't an issue?" So obviously a very multifaceted question here. I want to go over to Blake on this. What do you think?
Yeah, so mini games were actually one of the first things implemented. I think that one of the first systems that was fully implemented was fishing. Kind of weird, but it just kind of happened. Yeah, so we want other things like tavern games, like card games and like billiards, or well, not billiards, but like dart throwing stuff like that. We have things like horse racing and stuff like that. If time and money weren't an issue, I did originally want to try to get Ben-Hur style chariot racing in the game, but that was shot down almost immediately. So
Scoping.
yeah,
That's why he hates the word. I've said it a lot. Anyway, continue, Blake.
yeah, I think I'd like to have that word banned from the English language. Thank you. But yeah, so as far as like faction specific things, I don't think that's really anything we've touched on a lot, but there is one that I can think of. So we have a house called House Khan. They're inspired by Mongolians. They're the horsemen from a different continent that's in our world. So I had written a tournament that was inspired by a Mongolian coming of age festival, where the player has to participate in I believe it's archery, horse racing, and then for the end of it, the male champion has to team up against the female champion, and they have to race to the top of a mountain, collect a flag, and bring it back. Now, there's no rules, so the other person could kill the other person, they could come back and win. So that would be faction specific. You have to be part of that culture or faction to participate in it. So stuff like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I like how there's like faction specific. The fact that you just said that there's going to be faction specific mini games. That's a lot of fun to think about. What about you, Michael? How would you answer this question?
Yeah. So fishing tourneys. One of the things mainly in terms of expressing the lore to the player would be, yes, you have like the things you would think about in terms of a fantasy role-playing game: magic, combat, alchemy, fishing, obviously.
Right.
Maybe like traveling great ancient artifacts and dragons, right? But part of kind of drawing in realism, like grounding you in a world, is going to be those mini games. And we've been looking at the tavern mini games as one of the things we are actively looking at. We'll see if it's an early access one. We'll see kind of like when we can like make it happen, but what's one thing we are pushing at, because it just kind of grounds you in the archipelago so well. You step in a card game, a board game. I've been looking at one of the things I was looking at was like 13th, 14th century board games, and like trying to either copy them or emulate them, so the player can experience, right? Because really it does put you in the world. You can ride horses, you can look at great, awesome landscapes, you can swing a sword, but if you can't, in some ways, walk into a bar and roll some dice drink some beer with some guys, are you really having that fantasy life simulation? And that's really it. In terms of, restrictions for factions, I love the idea. It's not hard to do. It's really just saying Boolean or like, flag. Oh, you're not this faction member. Turn off, right? Stuff like that. It's not hard. It's just, again, effort time. How much can we flesh these things out? In terms of unlimited money, if that weren't an issue, I don't know. Like the entire game just becomes just mini games. A bunch of mini games. Like, turns out the Wayward Realms is really just like a pub crawl mega game where you're just going from like one city to another across the world and just playing the board and card games and trying to be the champion. That's really it.
Have you guys considered? Have you guys considered maybe like a collectible card game for some of those tavern games, and you can go from we've literally bounced that idea around. I've bounced similar ideas. It just kind of, the only issue is that it kind of takes a step away from the kind of more grounded low fantasy that we want. If we were high fantasy, I think you would see us kind of like play some goofy little like collectible card or piece or something game that you can then play against. That'd be fun. But I think it kind of like there is a bit of a tension between like the grounded magic and fantasy that we are trying to achieve in some ways, and that kind of higher, loftier like mechanic stuff, right? So there's a little bit. It's cool. We've talked about it a lot. It's always been shot down by all of us because like there will be a tonal mismatch. It just wouldn't really jive that well, So you could go in the opposite direction. You could do like a low fantasy thing where it's high fantasy for them. You could do like, Office, the managing, where you got to like commute to your office in a high tech world where people drive chariots that drive themselves.
Yeah. Write that down, Blake. Well, it sounds like we have a winner. It sounds like we have the next game lined up.
You can equip yourself with a 3-piece suit.
Yeah. Like very like Fallouty, like +3 charisma, like really just statty all the way down. But like really like ridiculous statty, like +3 not to charisma, +3 to like if +3 to business meetings, or like.
HR sent you an email, lose a turn.
Yeah.
Well, all right, folks. Well, listen, that's all we've got for today. I want to thank Blake, and of course not Blake, Michael, for coming today and spending their time, their valuable time with us, answering some incredible questions, and giving us some even more incredible information. So there's some things that you can do to kind of help us out here at the Wayward Realms. Of course, thank you for listening and for downloading. But please wishlist the Wayward Realms on Steam. It's a huge help. You can always hang out with us on Discord, found at waywardrealms.com. Follow us on all social media at OnceLost Games, and you can like, share, and smash that notification bell right here on YouTube at OnceLost Games. We're going to see you in our travels, but until then, happy exploring, everyone. Take care.